So why are apps so important? Now, I'm going to break it down bit by bit why our apps are so important based on some categories. And the first category we're going to start with is time spent. And when I say time spent, I mean time spent on major medias. Okay? So first of all, we have our print media. So about 25 minutes of our day goes on print media in the world that we live in now. Okay, so obviously reading the newspaper, which probably not a lot of you do, you probably get your news from an online source, which of course is going to tie into our time spent and why apps are so important. Next, we have our radio. So about an hour and 25 minutes of our average day is spent listening to a radio. Again, this can be your car radio, it can even be your Spotify if you're listening to radios like that, or even an application that you use to listen to radio stations. Again, it ties into the old-fashioned radio and it ties into our digital use of apps. Then we have our TV. And with our TV, we spend about 4 hours a day on average looking at TV. So when we actually factor in time spent on media, okay, we don't factor in using our TV for smart devices. Okay, so if we have a smart TV and we start to use applications like Netflix within our TV, this does not include our 4 hours. So now we're going to move on to our digital. So everything digital. This is 5 hours and 50 minutes. Okay, 5 hours and 50 minutes we spend using digital applications. Again, this is not just your mobile, but it is great to see how we use this digital era that we live in now. Now, I want to break this down just a little bit more so we get to have a look at the digital scale. Okay, this is my digital scale, graph form, and I'm going to break it down by desktop and laptop. Okay, desktop, laptop, and of course, our mobile phone. There is some others in there, but of the nearly 6 hours that we spend on a daily basis on a mobile device or a digital device, we can break it down like this. Just over 2 hours is spent on a desktop or a laptop, and over 3 hours of a daily base on average is spent on your mobile phone. So again, keep in mind that your apps like Netflix do not really tie into your TV because they would tie into either your desktop or they would tie into a smart device like your phone. So I hope this little bit kind of puts why apps are so important into perspective for you, because the amount of time that we spend on major media is quite a lot. Now again, let's give you some facts and figures to help this along. 51.3% of all of our web visits from a mobile. Okay, so 51% overall of all of our web visits come from mobile browsers. So that is the default browser on your phone, whether it be Safari, or if it's going to be Chrome, or Firefox, whatever the default browser is on your phone, 51% of all websites surfed come from an actual mobile browser. So it's quite a large number, but I'm going to break it down from a different perspective. Only 8% of all of the time that we spend on our phones is in the browser. So this shows the massive difference between using our actual phone as a web surfer compared to our desktop. It's a lot easier for us to whip our phone out now and just actually start looking whatever we want on the wonderful Google interface, on the search engine itself. But when we look at that 51% of all web visits come from a mobile browser, and we only use the browser 8% of the time, we then see that 92% of our time are spent in apps. And while this might seem like a crazy figure, once we start to break it down a little bit, it really starts to play in. I want you to take a look at this and tell me, now I know not everybody will, but tell me, is this a reflection of yourself? Do you spend about 19% of your time on a daily basis on Facebook? Do you use messaging apps? Do you look at media apps? What about your Snapchat? Okay, not as big as you might think it is, but it still takes up about 2% of the average person's time. YouTube, and of course then your standalone applications such as our gaming. None of these are done through the browser. They all have their own application. So these are the kind of things you need to keep in mind when you start to move on to your development stage, because it can be very easy to get caught up in the idea Okay, but sometimes you need to step back every now and again and just think about the statistics that are in front of you and how those statistics are actually achieved. So again, that's just my first idea of why apps are so important. That is our time spent